Hey guys, Andre here. Before we get to what this video is about, as you can probably tell from the headline because you clicked on it, I want to quickly address our video from yesterday, in which I predicted the final retro track in Mario Kart 8. And I predicted it would be Bowser's Castle 3DS based on several points and what I thought was overall sound logic. But as I pointed out throughout the video, it was entirely possible I was overlooking something, and as it turns out, I probably did based on several comments from you guys. So as it turns out, and I already knew this, so I don't know how I overlooked it yesterday, but every Mario Kart game to date in each Retro Cup has never had more than a single track from a single game. So that means it's very unlikely that Bowser's Castle 3DS will appear as a final retro track, because we already know that the final two cups in which it would have to appear already have a 3DS track each. So again, that means it's probably not likely. But what it does do is it does roll down or narrow down the field of what the final track could be a little bit, because we still think it will be a Bowser's track, or has a strong chance of being a Bowser's Castle track, which means it could be from any of the other games, with the exception of the 3DS game, of course, and Mario Kart 64, since that Bowser's Castle was already remade. So that helps narrow it down a little bit, and again, I do think it will be a Bowser's Castle. Okay, so with that out of the way, one of the tracks that was previously that a lot of people wanted to see back, and especially before we found out that Yoshi's Valley and Sherbet Land would be returning tracks, was going to be Wario Colosseum. In fact, I myself had said before I wanted to see this track. And even though it seems extremely unlikely now for several reasons, it is still a remote possibility, especially if they add more than 4 retro cups. Again, that too is unlikely, but you never know. But with that said, I just wanted an excuse to make this video. So kind of like with our Yoshi's Valley and Sherbet Land videos, I just want to go through Wario Colosseum and take a look at how it could work if they brought it back in Mario Kart 8. Again, I don't think they are, but there's a chance. But just go with me on this one. So let's go ahead and start it up here. I think I'm going to do it in a Grand Prix, which may be a bad idea, but the computer could totally mess me up here. But I like getting more of the energy of having computers there than doing a time trial. So, of course, we're going to be Wario and Waluigi on the Wario track. And, yeah, we're going to mosey on over to Wario Colosseum. So, like before, we're going to start off with just a quick overall tour of the track. We're going to do, one lap through, give you an overall feel for the track, especially if you haven't played this game before. And then after that point, I'll give my thoughts on how they get updated for Mario Kart 8. So, this track is really unique in Mario Kart 8 in that it's one of only in Mario Kart Double Dash, and that's one of only a few tracks in the game that didn't have 3 laps. Specifically, this one only had 2 laps. It was the only track in the game to do so, and that's because it's one of the longest tracks in the game. I did a quick run through, it wasn't going very time, a top speed or anything, but it took roughly about 1 minute and 20 seconds to get through a single lap, as opposed to about 45 seconds on many of the other tracks. So, it's definitely longer, and it's something they would have to account for in Mario Kart 8. Now we've already seen the fact that Mario Kart 8 will have at least single lap tracks, so I don't think having 2 laps would be a big deal, especially because at the E3 demo, they had 2 laps for each track, so it could be a feature in the game as we point out one of our analysis. Alright, so as you can see, we should talk about the track itself. It takes place in this Colosseum, as you can see in the background there, and the entire track is made of basically like a mesh, or like a caged-like structure. In fact, we're about to enter a cage real soon. So, yeah, it's weird, but this track, there isn't really a lot of variety to. I mean, you're always on the same type of terrain. And yet, it's one of the more crazier looking tracks, as you can see here. There's just, like, track going all over the place. So, yeah, we're in the cage part right now, where we just jump this giant gap. And, yeah, so the thing about this track is, it really, more than any other, I think it lends itself perfectly to Mario Kart 8 with its anti-gravity. This track really feels like a roller coaster. If anything, I'd say it's most similar to Water Park from Mario Kart 8, in which you just have this kind of crazy track going all over the place, and I think it would lend itself perfectly to that game. Okay, so you got an kind of overall feel there. I didn't talk about it much, but there's really not that much to talk about. So one of the main things that I think they can improve, or maybe actually not even improve, but one of the things they will have to change for Mario Kart 8 is how wide the track is. Because right now it is a super narrow track, and especially if I switch to Wario, you can see he takes up like, it looks like he almost takes up like a third of this track at certain points. Especially if we go, I think up here, like to this point. Like, he's taking up most of the track. So in Mario Kart 8, you're going to have 12 racers instead of 8. So they're definitely going to widen this a little bit. Now, something else that they have a lot here are jumps. And again, that lends itself perfectly to the Mario Kart 8 style of gameplay by having stunts, in which you can actually perform stunts now off these ramps, so it makes sense. I wouldn't be surprised if they add a few more here. Now, one interesting thing about this one in particular is it has a fire ring around it. Now, the funny thing is it's almost, the fire ring is an actual hazard, but it's almost impossible to actually hit it. Because unless you're actively going for it, which I might be able to do here. Let's see. Yeah, I hit it. But it's basically impossible if you're not trying to. So I don't know if they'll change that at all for Mario Kart 8, if they did bring it back. I just thought it was an interesting thing, where it's really more of a visual thing here than it is an actual hazard. Okay, moving on. I have a feeling they'll keep this track pretty much the same up until a main point coming up. So again, we have another jump here. Now what I do think they could do for corners like this is I think they might bank them. That's something we've seen a lot since Mario Kart Wii, and I have a feeling they could do it here. It just makes sense for the game, and it makes the cornering probably feel just a little bit better. I don't know if they would do it for this S-curve here. They probably wouldn't, just because not having, and they might, but I don't think it needs it here, especially not having the walls. It makes it more of a hazard, because you don't want to fall off. Okay, now we come to this big jump here, and this is what leads into, I believe, like the cage portion, or the part of the cage portion, and this is where I think they could add a flying section, because check this out. You have this giant gap here, and bam, right into the cage. It's a perfect part to add a flying section, and they could definitely even lengthen it. Either by changing, messing with the proportions of the level, or by just shortening that ramp there. There's any number of ways that can make that into a functional flying section, and I think it will make a lot of sense. Okay, so you land in this pretty broad area, which again makes perfect sense for a flying section, because you'd have this large landing zone. And then you go into this, this spiraling downhill section, which we can see here, and it goes for a while. And here is where I think they might start playing with the anti-gravity mechanics. And of course, this is just my idea. They could do so many things with this course. But here I think will make a lot of sense. They could have the track, either invert where you're driving upside down, or have it kind of corkscrew on its way down. So you're, both, going up and underneath the track as you're spiraling underneath around the central pillar here. I think it'd be cool. It wouldn't, change a whole bunch, but it'd be neat. Now here is a part of the track where it gets kind of crazy. Like, you have these really tight turns, you can see how windy it is, and there's very few walls in this segment, so it's really easy to fall off, especially when you're racing at top speed like 150cc. It becomes very dangerous, so that I discovered when I was doing tournaments for this game back in the day, or when I was playing in tournaments back in the day at like PAX and whatnot. So they could continue, I think they would continue to make this whole thing anti-gravity. It makes sense, especially being able to ram into other people and get a speed boost. Not only does it make it more dangerous, which is awesome, but it also makes it potentially more strategic too, because you still want to get those speed boosts, but it makes it more of a risk versus reward type thing, because it could mean you're going to hurt yourself off the ledge. So yeah, I think anti-gravity makes a lot of sense for this entire segment here, especially because we've seen for the most part that they do like to keep the anti-gravity kind of contained. Like, it doesn't switch on and off constantly. They usually keep it confined to a part of the track. Not always, but that does seem to be the case. Now here we have another jump, which again would make sense for Mario Kart 8, and again they might add a few more throughout the track. So continuing on, again, I think it might be anti-gravity throughout this whole section. You got the track make steeper turns or turn over on itself. You have a big jump here. Maybe that's where they'll disable it. Who knows? They could turn that into another flying section and have you connect to this part of the track. There's again any number of things they could do. It's really hard to speculate because so much of the track is very similar. But then we reach this part, this giant bowl, which is a huge part of one of the most memorable parts of this game. Because it's a huge, it's actually a pretty open-looking area, but it's kind of deceptive because most of it's blocked off except for the outer ring of the circle down here, which you can see that goes around to the other side. Now the main thing is of course the ramp in the middle, which I'm pretty sure is a faster way to go about it. It gives you a here, I'll take it in fact. It gives you a speed boost into the air. You get an iron box, a guaranteed iron box, unless someone went to it in front of you, and you land on the second speed pad right afterward. That gives you a boost into the final hill. And there go my mushrooms. So I have a couple ideas for this part. One, I have a feeling, as some of the other jumps, they might turn this into a flying section. It kind of makes sense. They would probably have to expand the hole here, which they could entirely do, and turn it into more of a flying section. And they could add even more item boxes into the air, perhaps. They will probably have to, since you have 12 players. And so that way you could fly into one of a number of item boxes and then land, on the other side. What else they could do is, as I suggested with Sherbird Land, they might actually expand the track here, because these walls almost look like they might be like blocking off like part of the track. Now there actually is a vertical gap there, but they could definitely, you know, just remove that for Mario Kart 8. So I think expanding this could be interesting, because it could add, it would just give you more opportunities or more things to do here. What they could do is add like speed boosts along the outer rim, as we've seen with other tracks in the game, like in Mario Kart Stadium, for instance. We've seen tiered tracks, just like how I propose here, and the outer rim has speed boosts to help you going, whereas the inner tracks are just shorter by their design. And I think it'd be interesting, just give you an alternate way of getting iron boxes or getting through this area. And who knows, they could even make it so that it turns into an anti-gravity section where you're going along, like, basically almost like a half-pipe type thing along the outside. Who knows? Again, there are so many things they could do. Alright, so that pretty much covers it. I think they would at the least add a flying section here. I think it'd be cool. Now, traveling along here, we're really close to the end of the track. Now, quick side note, normally mirror mode doesn't mess me up at all. This is the one turn in the game that always messes me up. But it's basically a blind corner. You can't see what's coming up going over here. Now, since I know the track so well, you always turn left. I mean, I always turn left, but in mirror mode, that means I'm turning into a wall, which would be, you can see on the right here. So yeah, just a little thing. It's not not relevant at all to this video. All right, so we just have this final part of the track, and this part is actually pretty interesting because it actually looks different than the rest of the track for the most part, in which we're actually racing on like this tiled or a stone pathway underneath this area above, which is just kind of interesting in and of itself. And in fact, that gave me another idea, actually, is what if they do turn this into a flying section, what if they added a path above you could fly to? You know, basically, so you would be racing on the portion of track above this tunnel. I mean, there's not a huge reason to, but it would be kind of like in Boo's Manor, or Twisted Manor, or Twisted Mansion it's called now, where you have the two tracks above that you can fly into, one above or one below. It'd be cool. I think it would make sense here, especially because we do have this tunnel. Why not add a track above it? Alright, and then it would, you know, terminate up here too. So, again, not a huge reason for it. They can maybe have it function a little bit differently, but it would just be an alternate path. Alright, then we have this final part coming up, just a final turn. You know, I don't think they do much here. Maybe they bank it a little bit, and then you have this final jump leading up into the final turn to the finish line. So again, I don't think this part is probably the most standard part of the course. I don't think they'll play with it too much. But you know, who knows? You never know what's intended. They could change any number of things. So yeah, that's my look at Wario Colosseum. I think this track makes so much sense to have in Mario Kart 8. That if at the least, if it's not the final retro track, which again, I don't think it is, it probably will be a Bowser track, I really do hope they will have DLC for this game, or some kind of expansion that'll add further tracks down the line. Because Wario Colosseum makes so much sense for the mechanics of Mario Kart 8, it would truly be a shame not to have it represented in this game, because there's so much I could do with it. It already is a really fun, wild track. Wario already hasn't been represented in the retro track selection as well, so it would make sense on that level too. Although we does have a primary track in the form of you know, a water park. Yeah, so there you go, guys. Those are my ideas. But what are your ideas? I want to hear what you guys think could appear in this track, and as well as what other retro tracks you'd like to see in the game. And as well, feel free to offer more thoughts on my prediction from yesterday and how wrong I probably was specifically. Although I think the broader Bowser selection or Bowser idea does make sense. Alright guys, so that wraps it up here. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned to GameXplain.com for more Mario Kart 8. Lots more, in fact. In fact, probably more, much sooner than you probably think. And other things gaming as well. Alright, thanks guys. Bye. God, this music's so sad. It reminds me of my prediction from yesterday. It's very fitting.